Ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and after a long hiatus, Kevin Warner, the founder and CEO of Leadium, is back. And today's episode is a little bit different because Kevin is an operator. His version of this show is his own audience. Well, no, look, Kevin is the operator version of this show's own audience. You sell outbound for a living and still writes the most honest founder content on what actually works. I've had it with him too many times. I don't agree with it, but it's sharp. And his sharpest takes are contrarian for an agency owner, very much so. Founders should never leave sales. Chasing scale kills agencies. Disagree. Pick your enough number. Disagree. And hire SDIs on cut, not process. This is built around those, not the meeting quality angle a previous guest already covered. So, Kevin, in a nutshell, who are you? What do you do? And why should anybody stay on for the next hour to hear what you have to say?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to talk to you again. Yeah, look, I've run Leadium for the last 12 years. Before that, we had another agency. I've been everything from sales development and tech from 2011 to 2013, on the marketing side, on the client success side, finally into the sales side. So kind of understand every growth department within a company, especially high growth companies, from client success down to product development, and then of course sales, which is by far, in my opinion, the most important because it leads to revenue, which leads to more growth. So you're nothing without sales, even though you can say you're nothing without product, but sales is pretty darn good at selling companies that don't have the product where it needs to be yet.
That's really true. Like Kevin you're running for 10 years, like you said. Every startup book tells founders the same thing. It says delegate sales, hire leaders, work on the business, not in it. But your advice is exactly how agencies die. And you still take calls other agencies hand to juniors, and you call your founders selling your moat. You also say that this whole industry sells. The guaranteed book meeting is a trust killer. I agree with you 100% there. But today we're going to get into why you never graduated out of the trenches. The enough number.
We graduated out of the trenches and then we went back into the trenches. So everything we've done is by experience. So we're 10 years old. At our height, we were about 400 employees, international operation. 30,000 square feet of office space in Dominican Republic from 2019 to 2022. It was through those experiences we went back to being a boutique, specifically in this sector of an agency. So can agencies scale? Yeah, marketing agencies have done it for decades upon decades. Can sales agencies scale? I would say no. Few can, but it's a specific product they're selling that they're able to scale. Most can't.
One thing I do agree with is that you have a very tight ship and your process. You know your process. You are confident in your process, and you just stick to your process. And one thing you wrote is that founders belong in the sales trenches, and it's non-negotiable. Every other playbook says delegate and get out. After 10 years, why are you still taking the calls that most CEOs handed off years ago?
Well, let me ask you how you want me to answer this framework. Do you want me to answer it in terms of from a sales development agency, why I think it's important, or just as general businesses?
No, from Kevin Warner, CEO.
Yeah, look, we found as we scale from a outsourced sales specifically, it doesn't scale if you're selling programmatic outbound. And what I mean by that is Memory Blue can make it scale because Memory Blue doesn't sell you programmatic outbound. Memory Blue sells you people. They're hiring employees and assigning those employees to your account. So you're actually hiring people. You're becoming an employer of record. Yes, you put them within a system. Yes, it's framed around sales, but it's still kind of an employer of record mindset. So they're an HR recruiting firm. That's scalable because at the end decision, the company that's engaging a Memory Blue-esque type of business gets to determine who's working my account and who's not. If you're in programmatic outbound, what we found was that imagine you have we sell sales development. Sales development is the SDR role. One thing we know is that the SDR role is one of the highest turnover roles in the sales position. I think,
Agree.
what is it, 12 to 14 months now. At one point a few years ago, it was the average tenure was 10 to 12 months or 10 to 14 months. High turnover. That's not only high turnover because they're unqualified. Yeah, some SDRs are unqualified and get removed after 3, 4, 5 months. Some just don't want to cold call for the rest of their life all day, every day, so they become account executive. So you have this kind of hierarchy. But it's really hard to hire great salespeople, period, who are great on the phone. Now imagine I have 150 sales development reps. One thing we know in sales is that you don't have the same quality people from one to the next. It's not the same quality. When you're in the outsourcing space, every client expects the A player. That's what you sell. You're hiring us because we have the top of the top team. We have, if you were to spend 3 months hiring someone, I can give you instant access to that position. But in reality, if you have 150 people on staff, not all of them are getting A grades, right? Some are getting C's. Some of those individuals learn the game. They realize, like, hey, no one's monitoring me on a daily basis. They're monitoring me. Now you question, well, why is there high churn in the sales development space? Well, you didn't have a great SDR working for you. An agency is great at making it seem like you have the A player and showing you metrics and maybe only selectively sharing recordings with you, however it might be. So they're good at making you feel that you're special. However, how do I know I don't have the better person or the worst, whatever it might be? So it's really hard to scale that mindset, and it's hard to hire SDRs in general anyway. So imagine an agency has their own churn in SDRs. So if you have 150, factor on 5 to 10% are going to quit every month because they're going to do the next thing, and then factor that you have 5 to 10% growth every month. So your agency difference there is like 10 to 20% headcount growth monthly. Some of that's just replacing it becomes this
it's
HR
a monster
nightmare. And in sales, the hardest thing to ramp up is, imagine you lose an SDR who just spent 6 months selling an AI tech platform into a law firm. How do I get someone ramped up so that you don't lose any of that time and it's kind of instantaneous? It's hard and nearly impossible as you scale and scale and scale. Again, easy to get to that 100-person plateau, but when you're talking about scale, what's stopping you from 100? How do you do 300 SDRs, 400 SDRs? It kind of loses it. So that's why if you look at most companies, their sales teams aren't dozens and dozens and dozens of people. If you have more interview with sales leaders, VP of sales, I bet you they'll tell you they have 1 or 2 account executives who crush it. And then the other account executives are they're doing just enough. But if you're coming to me for an SDR, imagine I tell you you're getting the SDR that's just enough. They're kind of good.
It's very true.
Good.
It's very true.
So that's just how sales works. And again, is that true with the entire call center industry? No, because customer support, it's read the script. It doesn't matter. Legal already worked through this script. Don't go off script. Lower call times. So how do you help that support ticket in the lowest amount of time? In sales, like, the hardest part is it's the person. If you're great at cold calling, how do I model that to someone else? It's not a trainable trait. You have to have someone who's organically out. So that's why it becomes very hard to scale. And so that's why we stay boutique, and just staying as a boutique, you can be very founder involved.
So if we just pull it back a little bit to the delegation piece and your positioning on delegation, one thing it can be very easy to highlight is being on the floor or just leading by example sets the tone, right? They say, my leader does it, the guy who I'm following, if he does it, I can do it. That sets the example too. But I really found very quickly how much better I actually was in a completely different environment within my company when I took myself out of, I'm incredible. I can hand to God say I am probably one of the best cold callers in the world.
Yeah.
I had no idea how to run a company, right? I am not the best at running. I can't even say I'm a good CEO. I'm a terrible people manager. But the element of orchestration and vision and problem solving around your company, that was where I was able to shine. So how do you find a way to not stay in the business, but also work on the business, but kind of stay true to your core? Like, how do you do that?
You just have less free time. You pick your you have to really define what you want from your agency first. And I think a lot of younger agencies, especially in the sales development outsource center or whatever it might be, have this mindset of, oh, we can get to a $10 million company. Oh, I'm going to get rich, but you don't really have what it's defined that you want. You can't
Yeah.
think that, hey, I'm going to start an agency in the outsourced sales development space and have the same mindset that the tech company I came from, where we're going to be worth 10x, or if you're freaking SpaceX, you'll be like 97x revenue, whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
In the agency world, that's not the truth. You have to be profitable on every account. No one's going to give you, there's no exit because you get like 0.7 EBITDA and your
Yeah.
EBITDA is going to be incredibly low. So you have to define what you want. Once you define what you want, you can really figure out, okay, what roles can I do? What do I need to hand off? What don't I need to hand off? If it's freedom and like, if your goal is just more income, that's easy to execute as an agency if you take on more of an ownership role and just do more tasks. Because if I do sales, I don't need to hire an AE. I can pay myself that AE salary. So you have all of these, you know, decisions you're making to determine, well, where do we want to go as an agency? For Leadium, we just stay boutique. We like staying 30 to 35 clients. It's easy to maintain. We're directly involved. The hardest part in the sales side and how we sell against sometimes is, look, people want, if you're going to hire a sales development agency, you want to know that they're experienced, not experienced in, oh, I can do cold calls. No, have you sold into, legal firms with cloud-based compute technology or X, Y, and Z? Do you have that experience? If you scale your agency, not only is there an SDR problem, but now there's a problem where you have account executives or account managers for those client programs, the ones who are actually defining, who are we targeting, why are we targeting, analyzing results on a weekly basis. Does that person have experience with that segment? So think about that as your VP of sales development. Hey, it's great that we have an SDR running your program, but who's actually the VP of sales development, who's overseeing that individual and making sure that the playbook is the right playbook at the right time? That takes experience. Agencies don't have those people. They have people who are good at managing SDRs and managing activity and making sure activity is getting done based on the contract, but they don't have people who are experienced in all of these. Imagine now you have a client with logistics, 3PL logistics, at the same time that you're doing this, at the same time that you have a tech company selling cloud compute. What account manager is going to have all that experience? So I toss it back off into you. Well, if you've been running your business for 3 or 4 years and you've worked directly with all of these clients over that period, you have the experience. That's not really a trainable experience that you can put onto an account manager. So you're selling your agency as if you have all of this industry experience, but who actually had that experience within the agency? Because I want to work with that person. Oh, that person left a year and a half ago. Okay, so then so that's
So then
again
it
one of the
naturally has to
reasons it's
be,
hard to
yeah,
scale.
it naturally has to be you. But I think what I'm getting at is there's a piece of this where, yes, you can be the hustle man. You can be the guy that works and has a strong ethical schedule. But where do you get time to think and like how to process what's happening? And I'm not saying you need hours
Yeah.
in the day, but where do you, in your 7 to 7, do you take those little slots for your, like, as a CEO, you have the most pressurized job, you have the most responsibility, you have the most weight, you have everything is on you. And no matter how much you kind of dictate or delegate your things out, responsibilities will be taken care of. But as a proper CEO that runs a business and other people cannot do everything the same, how does a CEO then gather their time to think and process manipulate their thinking to execute? Like where and when do you get the time to do that then, if you're occupied
Well,
with
break it up
everything?
into two buckets of the think and the process. So the one bucket is just the think and the process of how do we operate the business. Once you set in, processes internally, that becomes easier because one consistent with outbound is not much changes. The activity of placing dials, etc. Now, a lot of confusion comes in with what are we doing with marketing? What are we doing here? Where do we show up there? What podcast are we going to be on? How do we get in new leads? Are we running? Like all of that becomes a confusing web. But then there's a second thought process with that, which is probably the harder one for most, and that's, well, how are we using the right technology? What is the new strategy for outbound? You see these 1 to 2 year cycles where, hey, in 2016 you would have never picked up the phone because email was just so effective.
Yeah.
Then it switched. Then LinkedIn became effective, but then it became saturated. Then you have new technology. Remember, outreach was just brand new in 2016. You almost never hear from it now, even though it has more of an enterprise client base because they went up cycle. Then you have Apollo. Then you had smart leads come out in around 2021, 2022. So now your question is, hey, we need to be running the best outbound program possible. What does that actually entail? What software do we use? What data sources do we use? What subscriptions do we have to sign up for? What new strategies? What messaging works? I oftentimes say, if you see messaging on LinkedIn, like thought leaders posting, hey, here's the copy that works on LinkedIn, and you see those screenshots, that means it's often too late. If somebody's posting it on LinkedIn, it was a strategy that worked 6 months, 8 months, 12 months ago. It doesn't work anymore. So the harder part is, how do you make sure the function that you're delivering to clients is staying up? That just becomes passion. That becomes at midnight, what are you tinkering with? How are you using it? And how are you analyzing it in sense of, oh, this is a cool one-off, or oh, this could work really well for a unique little one-off, like silly campaign. You can't really get into that mindset. You have to think more, well, how does this process work for the next 12 months? Like if we were to implement this, like, does it work for just a very segmented market, or does it work for the majority of the market? So you're thinking about things differently on what tech, what processes, what features. That's the hardest part, because that's just backed in with, do you have a passion for outbound and figuring out the game in order to try to book more meetings?
Well, if you zoomed out just a little bit more, and it was, forget the we part around your business. What about you as the CEO? Because a lot of CEOs and founders are watching this for themselves, and they understand how to orchestrate and manage the business, right? They know how to communicate and deliver and whatever projects they have to. They know how to meet their milestones. But then there's kind of this separate, unique entity, which is called Mr. CEO, who lives in his own world. And you are not trusted by everybody on your team because you're the CEO. So you might not get all the information, or even your business partner. You might not get everything. So if you zoom it or take it back even a little bit more, how are you processing for yourself everything that's consuming your world and your business? Then you have your home life. At what point do you take a moment to think for yourself how you are doing, or to reflect on what you're doing yourself?
Yeah, so this is one of the, again, this is, you learn as you go, and you got to determine as a business owner, no matter what business, like, what do I want out of it? And when you're younger, you want, oh, I just want to be rich, and how do I get the expensive car? And I want to be a multi-millionaire with, an agency that's just grow. Well, with growth comes more problems. And it doesn't necessarily get you to the goal. So we're fortunate in that, hey, we've gone through these cycles. Today, we're now old enough, mature enough, experienced enough in our sector to say, hey, we want to stay small. We want to be a boutique. We want to manage our clients ourselves, because what that also allows us to do is we don't have to manage a team. We're not contingent on a team to deliver to our clients. Yes, we have a core team because we manage a small book of business, but by managing a small book of business, it essentially decreases the amount of variables we have to run or deal with on a daily basis. So what we realized through that kind of growth phase was, hey, who are we? What do we want? And what do we want not only for ourselves, but the kind of experience we want to provide to our clients, and know that we can deliver that experience because we're delivering it. So
Hmm.
that kind of boils back to it's easier now because you're such a small team, you're a boutique by design, you run a specific amount of revenue per year to give you kind of the payroll that you want, the amount of money you want. I say a lifestyle brand.
Hmm.
That's very easy to execute in the outbound sales development space because there's so many clients needing, B2B appointment setting. But it's also that one where you also have to say, I don't want more. I'm happy exactly where we are. And as a CEO, that allows me to easily manage all of the variables and
Okay.
not have to worry about, hey, if you have 50 team members, how are you getting this across? I don't have to worry about it because we don't have 50 team members. And if you don't like our management style in a boutique firm, then you're not right for us. We're not going to change our management style anymore.
Of
If,
course,
if you don't
absolutely.
fit, then you're out. And that's kind of how the boutique comes. And that's the same way we kind of work with clients, which is, hey, this is what we deliver, this is how we deliver, this is the experience you're going to get. And if you don't like that aspect, then we're probably not the right fit for you. And by staying smaller, not focused on growth, you can be more selective around who you're working with as well.
It makes a lot of sense. So if we rewind a couple of more years back, before Leadium, you co-founded Leadware, if I'm right, and led it into acquisition by Science. So what did selling that first company teach you that shaped how you built Leadium differently?
Yeah, Leadware and Science are the same company, so it kind of morphed into Science, and kind of rebranded and did a few things. Science was built for mass scale, and again, it was a very different time in outbound sales development, but this was sign customers at all costs, growth at all costs, just profit margin at all costs. And it was then what I think we had 170 clients when we left, when we kind of stepped aside in 2015. With now here's the problem you run into: you at an agency you have to run profitable. So now let's say you're selling $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month. All of the costs for the entire company have to get equated into that. So if you have 170 clients, then
Hmm.
the expense of the CEO can be spread across all 170. So maybe it's only
Yeah.
$100 out of each of them. But the office space has to come out of it. The marketing budget has to come out of it. The everything has to come out of what are you charging a client. And so when you're set up on a mass program, what you realize is, hey, if we want to run profitable, like at 170 customers, I make more money now with 30 clients than I would at 170 clients, because when we had 170 clients, you had such an overhead that accounted for so much of the expense. So now you're left with the decision of, do we charge more money just because we're a larger business and we have more overhead, or do we charge the same weight we've already charged and just make less money and become less profitable? So we really learned that business game in a way in the agency space, which is how do we run profitable while still making a great salary as an owner if we're going to dedicate, we're going to be the ones having all of this time spent, etc. It's also how we sell against people as a boutique. I oftentimes
Hmm.
say, hey, if you're going to sign with an agency who's double our price, it's not because they're double like the output or the performance. What you're paying for is their Google Ads budget. What you're paying for is their
Yeah.
podcast budget. What you're paying for is I bet you're on the phone with an account executive. My guess is that account executive six figures, and you're paying for that. Although that person that's selling you has no additional benefit to your program, but the cost you're paying, and that's how agencies work. The
Yeah.
problem is the SDR space. It's so you can so clearly
It's
define
noisy.
that and sell against it. Marketing is hard because hey, there are different skill sets in marketing. Marketing people cost more. Like it's harder to kind of showcase the difference in price point. But in the SDR space, it is because essentially we're selling sales, and if you were to hire an internal team, you know the costs that go into it. So that's kind of how we what we learned through that process with Leadware and Science.
Look, it's quite interesting, and it kind of leads into the next question, which is every agency owner. So you mentioned this. Every agency owner thinks they'll be happy at 10 grand a month, and then it's 25, and then it's
Yeah.
40, and the bar for enough keeps moving. I've been in that bucket myself. How did you actually land on your own enough number?
So when we downsized from we halved our business from 2022 to 2023, what we realized was we took a fraction of the amount of clients, we halved the revenue, we gave ourselves more jobs as founders, so we're doing a lot more. We're not doing more, we're doing different roles, right? Whereas if you're the CEO of a $4 million growth business, you have 200 employees, you have real estate in 4 different countries. If you're a CEO of that, you're running and making sure suddenly your day is about office space and your taxes and how are we paying less taxes, where can we put money, where should we invest, what about R&D credits, is that even available to us? So your day is analyzing the business in a different way to keep up with that growth. When we halved, we didn't become more busy. We just went back to the roots of we sell and we execute. And I don't need to worry about office space anymore because we have so very little. I don't need to worry about HR because we have no real HR need because we don't have turnover with a smaller team. So the roles just kind of changed. But in that exercise, we realized, oh, we can actually pay ourselves more because we got rid of the bloat. We don't need AdWords anymore. I don't need 3 creative agencies. I don't need a content writing agency. I don't need, clutch advertising spend or all of this cost. And a lot of that cost was just to sell more deals to keep up with churn and to keep up with growth because we all have churn. But now I need less deals. I only need 3 deals a month instead of 12 deals a month. So now I don't need to spend as much. So we can actually pay ourselves more, get back to jobs that you would say you graduated out of when you're a CEO. But we actually say we're actually really good at being salespeople and being and running outbound programs. That's what we started. We started the business saying we're great at outbound. Trust us. You're going to work directly with us. So then at some point you're like, hey, you're not working with us anymore. You're going to work with like entry-level account manager. And so that's where we kind of figured, I think we just like this. And I think it was the burnout of the growth. We had gone through 2 cycles, obviously with Leadware, then with Leadium. We had understood like the noise of hiring consistently, underperforming SDRs. Remember, if you have an SDR on a program and you know they're underperforming, can you really call your client and say, hey, the last week and a half that you paid us for, it wasn't our best week and a half, we're going to refund you the money? No. So now you're kind of in this gray zone of what type of business owner are you? So you're kind of factoring in all of those. And so we were fortunate that we were able to go through that to realize, okay, what do we want? And then let's just work to get there. And if I can work 7 years to get to a point where we can retire, then why even do it? Why keep going with that kind of growth at all
Of
costs
course.
when it was really paying off nothing?
I think it's a very, very good point to make, and it kind of alludes to the next point, which is a lot of agencies flame out after about 2 or 3 years. And of all of them chasing scale, hiring, compliance, price, which one of those almost got you?
We're very fortunate. None of them, I'll tell you, COVID almost got us, and that was through scale. So COVID through scale. So we have to grow. Not that we have to grow, we had to maintain what we were already doing. We had to open up. At that time, you had to have just people. There wasn't like automation platforms that handled a lot. AI wasn't around back then. If you were doing cold calls, you were doing like manual cold calls a lot of times. There weren't even really dialing systems built in. Again, this is the connect and sell era when that was at its highest. And that was your automated dialer, and that was Filipinos who were calling behind you and just connecting you when there was a phone. But that was expensive, so you couldn't necessarily afford that while still giving clients a great rate. Again, you can always charge more, but it's very hard to charge less. So I think through that, hey, we we need to set a foundation so that we can have the headcount in order to support this growth. But now that meant taking on leases and build outs right when COVID starts. And again, how do you account for that when you're a business owner? Everyone had to deal with it, and a lot of businesses went out, and you kind of held on from there. But that was also the turning point for us, which was, what are we doing here? Like, just one item like that can take out so many businesses. If we were a footnote of what we were growth-wise, we could have still executed while still being profitable. And just by building all of that didn't even get us any closer to where we wanted to be individually as business owners. So that was probably the only real point in the business's 12 years, 11 years that it was, it got a little gray.
Well, well, it's good that you got out of it. And promises of guaranteed meetings is one thing that I saw as probably the biggest headache as an agency owner. I think being an agency owner for me was the biggest wake up call in my life. And no matter how good your meetings are, no matter how good your work is, you will always have a subjective argument or opinion on the other side of that phone. So you said that promises of guaranteed meetings and pay per meeting deals destroy trust, and that being honest about possibly zero appointments is what wins loyalty. That's a very wild statement for an appointment setting agency to say. I know you do revenue as a service and everything, but walk me through the conversation where you tell that to a prospect.
I tell it to you on the first 5 minutes of a phone call. So we qualify right there. And again, it's a stupid point that only agencies brought up, this idea of guaranteed appointments. Nobody can do it. By the way, if you hire a VP of sales tomorrow, you're not saying, hey, I'm not going to pay you unless you guarantee 10 million in new business over the next 12 months. They would say, like, that's ridiculous. You still have to pay my salary, right? I'm still going to execute my job. A lot. By the way, I'm only a VP of sales. You as a company have to build the product that I'm selling. I can't sell a product that doesn't work. Or, hey, you have to reinforce me. You have to give me a team and invest in the team and invest it. Like, so much has to come together. It's crazy that it makes sense because no one actually guarantees meetings. Everyone puts in, hey, we'll set you 15 meetings a month, or we'll work a fourth month at no cost, which isn't guaranteeing meetings.
Yeah.
And by the way, if I didn't do it for you in the first 3 months, what makes you think I'm going to do it in the fourth month? And by the way, in the fourth month, I'm not going to really try because now it's all about protecting our margins and we're not getting paid anymore. So I'm not going to really give you my A team, right? Now we're talking about C team. And the problem with sales development is if I enter a cold call, not really caring and not really trying to convert it, I could still show that I did it. The phone call was placed. I stayed true to the script. I read the script. But if you're not in it to kind of get that meeting, it's never going to book a meeting. So that's why I say, hey, in sales, it's really hard to scale because you can be hiring people that read a script, but there's a difference between reading a script and like becoming that salesperson.
I agree. I even heard it, and it's not the nicest thing in the world, but there was one agency that we were speaking to, and we did a few posts, and some of their reps started to reach out to me, and I was like, "Oh, this is interesting. I thought you got the CEO told me the organization was flawless, amazing. Their team are paid well, they're all happy." And these reps were annihilating this guy. And like, it's a cheerleader club. I have to like the post. We have to laugh at jokes. We're churning clients after 1 month. And I'm just like, this is all just like, it's all a bunch of fluff. They're not doing the right things. So you kind of, it's crazy.
Well, to the appointment setting, and here's how I would say it to anyone who's on the phone. Look, I could set you 15 appointments. It doesn't mean anything. It's a heartbeat. I'm good at sales. I can get somebody who's on the way to pick up their toddler from school just to say, hey, sure, send me an invite for next Tuesday. They don't care. They don't care about you, the product. People are nice. And I use the restaurant example. How often do you have a shitty restaurant experience, but you don't go onto Google afterwards? You just, you don't even complain to the waiter. You look at each other and it's like, this is horrible. The food sucked this time. The wait staff was horrible. The drinks weren't good. And then you walk out and they say like, you vote with your money. Like, you don't go back. You just don't go back. You don't voice that concern to anyone. You just don't go back. So again, I can do that same. People are nice, so people might take a meeting with no intention to even show up on that meeting just because they don't want to tell you no on the
Yep.
phone. And you oftentimes see people who are picking up their phone, who are willing to have a conversation, are those people. So now it becomes, hey, it's not about appointments, which is a vanity metric. It's about value. I can set you 3 meetings and all 3 become customers. You would prefer that than 20 meetings where 0 become customers. So let's
Exactly.
look at this month over month. If I'm not providing you value at the end of the month, whether that be in total meetings booked, quality of meeting, learnings, like just the entirety of the program. If you're not getting more value than the cost of the program, then you should cancel, because any employee who's not providing you more value than it's costing the business shouldn't be in the business. So look at us on a month-to-month basis, which is why we do month-to-month, because we're the equivalent of you hiring an internal sales rep. And just because I didn't book 10 meetings doesn't mean you didn't get a meeting with Apple and just signed Apple as a new client, and you didn't get a meeting. Like, so you got to look at it that way. No one's giving an account executive, hey, you have to close 10 meetings this quarter. What they're saying is you need to close $200,000 in net new revenue this quarter. Whether
This is
you
even
do that
harder.
in 6 meetings or 10 meetings, we need you for your seat to get to. So the whole idea of a meeting count is just an agency's way of getting you to focus on what you think you want versus the actual revenue and value that you actually want.
Yeah, the reason I was mentioning it is because the conversation came around, is it important for you to book meetings and have a volume number of meetings, or is it important for your customers to know what happens after the meeting and where those opportunities or where the efforts are after you review? So a lot of the CEO agencies that I'm speaking to right now are having a difficult time managing client expectations. And we're not talking about the basics of, I have a contract that says your ICP is this, or we have agreed this. All of that is nonsense, because if that contract was signed by the CFO and the CEO, who's then handed it off to sales enablement, they've not read that contract. So you have a very different candidate in the picture, whether you include them or not. So when you get down to that, what do you think is the best way for agency owners to manage their client expectations with either proof, data, or maybe another option that you would suggest?
Is that pre-signing, like setting the expectation?
No, this is after so let's say we're 6 months in, we have a 12-month sales cycle. You guys are crushing it as the agency. You have that meeting with now the person who's in charge, and they say, are we doing good? I feel like we're behind. You know you're doing good. How do you manage that client's expectations?
Yeah, good is relative right there. So this is, by the way, why does this become a very hard industry to scale? Because good behind. Let's sit down and talk about that, because you, CEO, have a very different idea of what good and behind means versus the 29 other clients I have. So as a business owner, how do I scale my account management team where they actually have to be incredibly experienced VP of sale level people sitting down and defining, hey, before I tell you, are we ahead or behind? I can get into the analytics. We have an 11% connect rate and a 62% conversation rate, and our meeting, conversation to meeting book, and our open rate is this. So in terms of raw numbers, outbound performance, yeah, it's a good performing program. We're booking enough meetings, it seems like. You stayed with us this long. But let's first sit down and say, what does good and behind actually mean? You have a 12-month sales cycle. Why are we even having this conversation for another 6 months? Because I don't know. I can tell you, is 8 meetings good or 12 meetings good? You don't know, because you don't know what your close one rate is yet on an inbound meeting. If the quality of our inbound meetings mean that you have a 40% close rate on, outbound, a 40% close rate on outbound meetings versus, 20% that your internal team is driving, then that means you're getting 2 to every 1 deal, because our meetings are more qualified. So whether I'm setting 7 meetings or 15 meetings, it's a moot point on what we think is good right now, because you haven't even finished your sales cycle, which is a 12-month sales cycle. So why are we even in this conversation yet, unless you can define what's good and bad and where you think we should be, and don't just give me we just want more.
So do you think that conversation never goes like that, though?
We have that conversation. Now they might not like it and they might still cancel, but that's the problem with the agency is yeah, at some point, even if it is valuable, after 3, 4, 5, 6 months, we can see it working. We can see appointment setting. I can't dedicate another 6 months until I know those numbers. So we're canceling you, even though it might be working, because we just can't keep going. Because what happens if it doesn't? So they have to hedge their bets a little bit. And agencies are easy to turn off, turn on, turn off, turn on. And so it might come to a point of, hey, good points. We don't know what good and bad is yet. We can't just keep paying you until we define that. So now that we know how you performed, let's shut it off. Let's wait until our close cycle comes through. We'll then analyze it. And if it makes sense, we'll re-engage and have another agency. That's why you see some companies come back every other year, is because they're going through those consistent cycles.
It's absolutely crazy. So now in the world of AI, where we believe AI is going to cure cancer, it's going to change, it's going to take us to live and live in space. Do you think with technology at that scale, we should have something that allows us to prove the value in what we do as agency owners?
Sure. I mean, if you have a way to prove value, then the problem with proving value as the agency owner becomes we have to define it for every individual company, and that becomes the crux of everything. Is a lot of people for agency 1 versus agency 2, my PM doesn't even know what they want. They were just tasked with get more leads and get more appointments, but they wouldn't even know how to measure effectiveness versus another. So now that's where that moving goalpost in the SDR outbound space is really hard to define, is how do you prove out value outside of like clear-cut closed-won deals, which are hard to get to, especially when you go into the SMB market.
Well, what we've seen and what we've heard is the comparison lever of if I am a B2B technology company that sells healthcare products, if I am matched up or I see that there are 10 other companies similar to me, and they are also, or they have also run campaigns similar to me, and they're tracking against this number and they're halfway there, then you might be able to say, I think we are, right?
I think
but
it's so
how would that be hard? So hold on a second. So you would say then that your own data that showed the past however many campaigns you ran that were showing X trend, exact same characteristics, profiles, years in business, revenue, that the company you're working with today that matches those characteristics, the information from your side would be hogwash.
Nothing's comparable. And so what I'll use just think the closest competitors you possibly can, so that it's a perfectly aligned comparison. 3PL logistics company does this, does brokers, yada yada. Now, when we get in front of you, you say, well, how do you want to position this and sell your business? Every business, by the way, even though I'm in the exact same, Leadium is a SDR appointment setting outsourced agency. We are very similar to a dozen other agencies. Guess what we all do? We all position ourselves differently. Guess what our outbound message sounds like? Very different outbound email. Because me as a business owner, I want to present our company a bit different. This is how I want it. This is the value proposition I want. This is the hook and the call to action. The other company says, oh, no, we just want to put out appointments. We promise you 15 appointments. Put that front and center in the email copy, where I would say never even touch that in the email copy, even though we're A/B and we're targeting the same business. So now it becomes, hey, isn't that going to affect all of the conversions? Don't you think if you had a Facebook ad and you were displaying, you're both selling sneakers, Nike and Adidas are both selling sneakers. However, their ads are categorically different in design and color and call to action, etc. And they're not going to have slightly different conversion? Of course they will. Just the messaging alone will convert differently. So now it becomes, okay, I'm not going to use the exact same messaging and exact same email because you as a business don't want that. So even when you have everything held static, is it a good indicator of what could potentially be? Maybe. But then you have to account for, when did we launch that program? A year ago? 6 months ago? Oh, guess what's happened since then? Well, is the market up or down? Did we announce tariffs or not? Yeah, well, the tariffs went on in February, so that means everything pre-February for that that industry. Throw those comparisons out the door. So where
But
we're missing.
one thing will remain true though. Out of all of what you said, one thing will remain true across all of it. The TAM, for example, however important that is,
Yeah,
that will remain true. Your average revenues across the type of company, the amount of
correct.
people, that will have a trend. The size of your company and the amount of employees relative to the
Correct.
revenue will be correct. So, all right, if those are not the indicators of am I tracking successfully, then as an agency owner, for you to look at it, and if you were to position something, how does the client, if the client is listening to this, how can they use Leadium without Kevin speaking to me and telling me your story? How can you show me that we are tracking differently?
By tracking differently, what does that mean?
Tracking differently compared to other companies that you've worked with. So again, let's just say name what you said, a 3PL company. So you're working with a 3PL company right now. They've been around for 3 years. You might have a lot of success with 3PL companies and they've been around for the same amount of years, for the same amount of time, and they have revenue numbers that they would like to get to. So what would you tell them if the revenue numbers, if the conversion metrics are all varied? What evidence do you then recommend they look at or do or use to trust that their campaign for themselves is working as it should be?
Yeah, it's also broad. Like, who cares? Like, look, you're spending $4,000 a month.
They care. They will care because they're
value.
spending with you.
So they care about value. So what I said, who cares about how the other? Stop looking at your neighbor. Stop looking at your neighbor. Who cares that he drives a better car? Who cares that they got 5 more appointments? Like, what he does as a job is different than yours. Stop looking at how big your neighbor's house is and how big his bank account is. Let's focus on you right now. Sure, as an agency owner, we spent $4,000. Let's go over the performance and where it compares for you. We know industry averages. Who cares if I have a 42%?
The CFO cares. The CFO cares.
The CFO cares about,
and the COO.
they care about, did we return more value than we spent on the service this month? So let's look at that. Okay, it cost you.
Okay, that's interesting.
It cost you $4,000 to use us this month. We set you 7 appointments. Sure, another company could get 10. Are you going to cancel us? Because let's look at the 7. How qualified were they? How qualified weren't they? So let's just.
How do you show that then? So while you're on that, because that's interesting, I think you're unpacking something quite important. So when you then start to unpack how were the quality of this meeting, what are you looking for in evaluating what or how was the quality of that meeting?
For us, we don't care. So I say we don't care. Our feedback is 100% from client, and that's, hey, we sniper approach. That's our outbound model. We don't do shotgun. So you have to approve every contact before we ever reach out to them. You have to approve every call script and how we position it. Most of the time, by the way, clients editing our recommendations. They're adjusting messaging. They're adjusting call scripts. They're adjusting how they want us to present them because they want it to be so on brand. So now, if you know we attack the exact decision maker and we use the exact script and framework and we have the call recording and we talk through pain point and they said, yes, I want a meeting. For us, that's a qualified meeting. Now we can get into, isn't bank qualified? We stay out of that because again,
yeah, we can't do that. Yeah, those are nuances none of us can control.
That's a Memory Blue, like a Memory Blue agency can, because that's an employer of record. You can take the time to train that SDR. They can get into that detail. You're probably going to have fewer appointments, but you're hoping that the bank qualified aspect makes up for it. So for us, that becomes a qualified meeting. If it's not qualified, we have to ask why. And by the way, oftentimes that why is, we're targeting the wrong decision makers. We're going after, marketing managers instead of marketing directors. Or the bigger one, we're going after marketing directors instead of marketing managers, and this is below them. We actually need to enter the conversation with a marketing manager who will then bring in the director, because oftentimes you want to go up but you really need to climb the ladder into that decision maker. So again, going back to the original question, it's that value. And let's not talk about the opportunity cost now, which is, hey, you're also getting data. You're also getting a domain infrastructure built into that cost. You're also getting access to Apollo and Nooks and these other platforms, which you're going to have to pay for those. So even if you take a $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, whatever dollar cost, and you factor out the tech fee portion of it, that's probably 25 to 35% of every company's cost is the tech fee if they're using enterprise grade tech. So now
It's true.
you
It's
don't care
true.
as the CFO, but we're getting into opportunity.
Yeah.
This is about value that you're getting driven every month. At the end of the day, you're right. That value conversation changes after 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, and that's why it's a high churn. They no longer care about appointments. They no longer care about what you're doing, how you're doing it. They don't care that you're performing and tracking well above what the industry and the client examples are. Now it becomes, we haven't closed a deal. We don't have revenue from it. We're canceling. We don't care that you are tracking well above our competitors and we're getting X amount better performance. So that's where, as an agency owner, you have to say, it doesn't matter. Who cares about that on day one?
Yeah, that can't fly because you're gonna get again. So the last point on that, because I'll have 2 more questions and then we'll wrap it up. But the point on that is, if I am the person who's buying the service, right? So I have bought the service when I was at Mega. I had to buy the service, and it doesn't matter how much I get the fucking whole agency space. I get how it works, so I understand it. But when there is a CFO who says, I don't give a fuck about all that stuff, I need to know this and this right now. And I get that he's not, the measurement is not on the revenue. But if I have to then present something, a piece of paper that I might not have context to deliver verbally on the meeting with him or that person or her, what do you show them? And that is what agency owners are screaming for today. It's a lot of them. And I'm interested. That's why I'm interested in your take, because you sound like you have a very good pull on
their
it.
campaigns, and then we show them, and let's not forget, to get to 3 to 4 to 5 months, we went through a lot of advisement and recommendation and changes and doing this, and hands often get tied. And so now it becomes, and by the way, we're not even getting to the point of, hey, can you share all your account executive recordings? Because we know for a fact that 30% of them didn't even follow up with the leads that we set. So let's not look at our funnel and get into your funnel. So we could get there, but we can't because we're an agency and we can't push like that. But there are a lot of examples. Let's get into, hey, you're targeting an industry that we told you is underperforming. We're targeting 3 vertical segments. That means 33% of our outbound is split across all 3 of those verticals. One of them is well underperforming, so it's bringing down our performance in amount of meetings booked, but it accounts for 33% of outbound. We recommended shutting that off, focusing it on the ones that are, so that we can split 50-50, increase the amount of pipeline that immediately went to it. You guys told us no, that you wanted to continue testing out messaging. So how do you want me to analyze what's working, what's not, when you made a decision to say, we don't want appointments, we want to test messaging for that? Yeah, you want appointments, but you also knew that it was underperforming and you continued it for 3 months, even though we sat there every week saying, hey, we need to adjust the campaign for this reason or this reason. So that's why there's so many micro decisions that go into it outside of just the, we want this big picture of what can you show me in one page on how we're performing. And the problem is, for every business and every single time they're executing outbound so categorically different, and they're measuring success so categorically different, that it becomes really hard to have one static answer. Which, by the way, goes back to the beginning of this conversation on why can you not scale in the sales development space? It's because every business revenue team is so categorically different. Even when you have 2 competitors in competing spaces, how they're looking at an SDR function is so different.
It's very different, absolutely very different. Look, and it's an interesting point because, again, what you're saying is the way you are able to refine or improve or iterate on a campaign. So are you telling me that when you bring that level of insight, that didn't change the whole conversation for you guys? They still they still had the same. We get
in arguments with clients because we're trying to, again, we can, because your account manager is one of us founders and we live and breathe it, and we're essentially a VP of sales development. So when we're sitting there and we're saying, hey, like, we can't, are you guys crazy? We're not going to perform if you make that decision. We have to do this and this. And if they say, no, we want you to do this, but we want more appointments, we'll actually fight back a little bit as if we're equals, because we're trying to get to the same goal, but we're not just going to do something because they said, hey, jump because we asked you to jump, because we kind of know. At the end of the day, we will, but we're going to put up a little bit of a consultative fight at the beginning part of that, so that you know, hey, you're going outside of what we would think is best practice or what we would recommend based on experience.
So how do you deal with that one part of that question, which is their reps? So let's say I watched another agency show me 127 meetings, and out of 127 meetings, they had 3 notes from the client side that were filled in based on the outcome of the meeting. Because when you hand off the meeting and say fill in another note on top of your CRM, that's very highly unlikely to happen. So you you get to this place of, how do you tell your customer your sales team is shit?
We don't want we don't want notes to that degree. Yes, we would like your feedback. We would love you to provide it to us. It's not our job. Our job is, you're telling us the target market you want us to go after. You've told us how you want to position the value proposition, the value business reason on why you think someone should convert, the problem you solve, the pain point you solve it. My job is to go connect that. Get as many appointments with people who have the problem today that you solve for and are looking for a solution. What happens after that, by all means, you could have the world's worst sales team, and their feedback, I don't know. I don't know who you're hiring. I don't know the calls that they're taking or what taking. If they're not qualified, you'll let us know that, hey, these meetings aren't qualified for what reason? Because it's the wrong decision maker, because of this reason. It should never be because they don't have a problem, because that was a prerequisite to getting the meeting in the first place. And we have a call recording where we talk through their problem. So I don't care about the feedback of, hey, it's unqualified because they took a meeting for no reason. And again, I think your SDR team shouldn't be built into that kind of sphere. Are we targeting the wrong people? That's the larger conversation. Are you targeting the wrong market?
I'm going to jump in on that because that's very confusing. I would say that's a bit of a contradicting statement for an agency owner. How could you say that if you're booking meetings for your client or delivering revenue as a service, and you are generating a significant amount of leads that should be closing within, let's just say, within the time frame of the POC?
Let's not assume that, number one, but okay.
What would you not assume? Which part? I said 2 parts.
I'm not going to assume that they should be closing.
Well, you would like. Okay, so you would like. I don't know. Yeah, but that's not the point. The point is, if I'm generating leads for my client, the whole point of me generating leads is so that they can hopefully close them or take them to a close one, because that's the true ROI. But if if you get to a point and you know that their team, which is out of 10 clients, you could say that 4 or 5 of them will have a team that one of their reps screws up those meetings. One of those reps expects that the meeting should be banned, right? And they are killing your deals, right? They are killing your opportunities and preventing you from recognizing true success, which is the end part of the journey. So how then could you say, I don't care?
So one thing you realize very early is you're an agency, you're hired to do a job, and you're expendable. Period, point blank. And I've been doing this for 10 years. We've had over 2,000 clients. You are hired to do a job, you're expendable. If you have an internal SDR, because we're often graded against internal SDRs when they exist, completely different set of rules. These are people with families. We like them. We go to happy hour. They only did 40 calls today because we did this good team stand-up. We all went to the beach last week as a team building event. There was no prospecting. Wait, they didn't do prospecting for a week and you paid them their salary? Yeah, of course. So how are you defining value? Well, that is value in a team and this culture that's being built. And, one day they'll become an account executive. So we want them to learn and adopt. So you're getting graded differently, right? So now I'm saying, hey, companies actually grade this sales development ROI puzzle so differently, even when you're looking at the SDR role. So for us, we look at it, look, you're hiring us to do a job. We're good at our job, and we're good at doing it. And we know that we are expendable. If I don't provide the value, however you want to judge value this month, this quarter, this year, because it's going to change, right? If I set you 15 appointments, you might love us. If I set you 5 appointments, you might hate us until you realize, oh, the 5 appointments converted at a 75% rate, the 15 appointments didn't. But what is it? Because when we set 15, you actually loved us more that month, but now you're saying it was actually an underperforming month. So the goalposts are changing every month as well because you're an agency. Agencies, they can change the goalpost on you at any point. Hey, we wanted to target this ICP, now we're targeting this ICP. What do you mean? We just launched the campaign. Yeah, but we're going to a conference and we want a totally different one. You know that's going to interrupt your pipeline for the next like 6 weeks because of what we just built and we ramped into it. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Let's switch it. Okay, but 6 weeks from now, don't come to me complaining that we don't have the appointments because we just got into a good. The goalposts are moving every single week, every month. So know that we're hired guns. We're good at what we do. We can do it efficiently. We know how to connect with your buyer. We know how to pitch your service. If there's demand there, we're going to tap into your demand incredibly effectively. And we know we're expendable. And you're going to define what that expendable means at any point in time. And it doesn't necessarily have to correlate with revenue. So let us focus on what we're good at. And what you're telling us to do, we will point and shoot and target what we're known experts in. And then you'll tell us if it's not providing you value anymore. But you still have to maintain ownership of that. We can't step across the bounds and start questioning your sales team. Start questioning, did you even have us target the right ICP to begin with? I'm not going to question your business decision on which industries you want to grow into. So we're incredibly good at outbound. We can create a machine, and our goal is that if you set all the parameters the right way, it should be driving revenue because that's an industry you've sold into and can sell into, and your account executives are equipped. So when everything works together, it's perfect, but the goalpost changes. So you have to control what you have to control. When you start thinking about things you can't control, realize you're going to get canceled anyway. Even when
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Get canceled, right?
Makes a lot of sense. So last question of the hour for a revenue leader who's been told to scale headcount and chase volume. What is the one move this week that would make their outbound leaner and sharper?
I don't know why you got to scale headcount to scale activity or volume. Those are kind of two competing standpoints. But repeat the second part of that question.
What's the one move this week that would make their outbound leaner and sharper? So you got Anthropic. We've seen 25 new ads for sales development. You've got OpenAI. You got Ramp. You've got Rippling. They're all hiring like crazy because they have these demands. So if you're one of these guys and you or girls and you are hearing that, what's the one move that you're hearing from Kevin that would make their outbound leaner and sharper?
Leaner and sharper. Leaner and sharper. I play in a non-lean and sharper game. Sharper, you continue to process your analytics or run more segmented campaigns, get as segmented as possible. That's not necessarily leaner because it involves more. I just think outbound's not leaner and sharper anymore. Outbound is, like, it requires human and static. And yes, you can have these processes that create better research and data is easier to access, but hey, you need people on the phone, and phoner is not leaner and more refined unless you go with Titan X, which is going to get you more connect phone numbers. But now you're talking about ROI, and if we don't play games in a lot of instances with the large enterprise SDR agent enterprise companies that are hiring headcount because they have to hire headcount. I'm more in that when you're a mid-market and SMB company, what are you going to do? Leaner is, you just got to be more strategic and be more personable. Use technology to increase that, but the idea is not more volume. It's the quality of that volume is far more important.
And last one, where is Leadium in the next 5 years?
Right where we are today. We're not moving. We are who we are. We're great. You're working directly with us. Our goal is to make a successful outbound program, but there's no shortcuts to it. Like a lot of hard conversations right here. Imagine you've never launched an outbound program. If you've never launched an outbound program and an SDR agency is saying we can set 15 appointments for you on a sales call, say like, what are you talking about? We don't even know what works, what doesn't, what message. We've never launched it. We don't know a baseline. I don't even know if anyone cares about your business yet. Sure, you tell me like you created the world's best product, but do I know that yet? I got to talk to your customers to figure that
Yeah.
out.
Well, look, I think that's a great way to end it. I think we covered on some really, really interesting topics. It's great that you were able to shine a light on it too. Any last words for anybody that wants to find you, work with Leadium, or know more about Kevin's day?
No, easiest way is just our website. Pretty easy process there, or LinkedIn as usual.
All right. Thank you, mate. That's it for now. That's the
Thanks,
pod.
Shane.
Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this episode and staying here the whole way through. If you like what you saw, click subscribe. It'll take you 2 seconds. It helps me reach amazing guests and deliver valuable content for you. And if you ever want to find out what we do as a business, go to www.gorevintel.com, and that is the place where we help you make decisions that are backed by intelligence, and it's for founder CEOs. That's it for me for now. I'll see you on the next episode. Bye.